Let's get more on what these developments mean. With me now is Avi Mayer. He's the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. Good to have you on, Avi. First question for you. Given what we know about the current sticking points, do you see a deal potentially getting through in the coming days?
Good to see you, Jim. That's, of course, the million-dollar question. There is a great deal of eagerness here in Israel, particularly on the part of the hostage families and their supporters, to see a deal go through and have their loved ones brought home. But we understand that, as you said, there are several very significant sticking points. One, of course, as you mentioned, is Israel's insistence that it maintain a presence along the Philadelphia corridor, which would prevent Hamas from smuggling in the sort of weapons that were used on October the 7th. Hamas, of course, wants to have that ability and so is opposing that demand. There are other points of disagreement. And so over the past few days, while there had been some optimism, that has been replaced by a degree of pessimism. Israel is nevertheless sending a high-level delegation to join the talks tomorrow in hopes of bringing about some kind of a breakthrough.
Yeah. Let's talk for a moment about security along the border between Gaza and Egypt, because, of course, we don't know the details of the proposals being presented to the negotiators, but the sense is that short of an Israeli military presence, there has been a suggestion of an international force or others who would monitor that. So, in other words, there would be no one's proposing there would be no security along that border. The question is who does it and for how long. And of course, you're aware of the sensitivities for a permanent Israeli military presence inside Gaza. Is there any way that the IDF not being that presence is something that the Israeli Prime Minister would accept?
Well, we're not quite sure. We understand that in a recent conversation with President Biden, he may have made certain concessions, for example, saying that we wouldn't have a full Israeli presence along the entire corridor, but rather on specific points in order to intercept any possible smuggling attempts. We don't know exactly what the proposals are on the table, but I think it'd be very difficult for Israel to concede its own security by enabling Hamas to continue bringing in whatever weapons or other materials it would like from that point. And in the past, unfortunately, international forces, for example, in Lebanon, have not been successful in intercepting or stopping hostile forces from rearming and turning those areas into armed camps. And so I think this is a very significant sticking point. And absent some kind of concession on Hamas's part, I'm not sure how we can move forward.
There were some reports this week that Netanyahu has privately been saying that he and his negotiating team are not on the same page. And it was notable to me when I saw the defense minister, for instance, this week make public comments about progress along that border there, saying that Hamas's units in the southern part of Gaza have been eliminated and that many of the tunnels have been destroyed. Do you see evidence that inside the Israeli negotiating team there's even some daylight?
It wouldn't surprise me. Israel is a very diverse and factitious society, so it would not surprise me if there were some kind of difference of opinion, not only between different negotiators, but between the government officials and representatives of the military and other security forces. But I think that we are fairly unified as a country in desiring that there be some kind of a conclusion to this horrible saga over the past 10 months. The fact that there have been hostages in Hamas captivity for over 320 days is viewed by so many Israelis as completely unacceptable. I think there's a general desire to bring them home as quickly as we can.
And of course, we're not far away from the one-year anniversary of October 7th as well. Just a very basic question before we go. Is your best sense that the two sides in this deal, Hamas and Israel, of course, there are other negotiators, mediators, etc., but ultimately this is a deal between Hamas and Israel, that they want a deal, that they want an agreement, they want a ceasefire and to exchange hostages for Palestinian prisoners?
Well, look, I think we're seeing a lot of posturing right now. I think you see both sides trying to sort of rally for the best possible deal that they can get. But we understand that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, is under tremendous pressure from his own men, who say that they simply cannot sustain continued battles with Israel. They want a ceasefire. Of course, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is himself under tremendous pressure in Israel to bring about some kind of a ceasefire. So I think the desire is there. The question is, what will it take to bring about some kind of a breakthrough and an ultimate deal?
Of course, hanging over these negotiations are the continuing fears about an expansion of this war. I was up in northern Israel in the last couple of days, and we've been watching very closely the cross-border fire there, which seems to be picking up in both directions. What is your level of concern that another front opens up in this war, in particular if the ceasefire negotiations go nowhere?
Well, Jim, it's important to realize that there has been a second front to this war from October the 8th, when Hezbollah launched a sustained barrage of rockets into northern Israel that has continued to this day. The entire north of the country, as you know, has essentially been depopulated. Tens of thousands of Israeli families have not seen their homes in 10 months. So that war, that front, is very much present. The question is whether it goes even further and turns into all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel, which would be tremendously devastating to both sides. Hezbollah, of course, has threatened to respond to the killing of its senior official in Beirut several weeks ago, but it's held off as negotiations were ongoing so as not to be viewed as having thwarted them. If they break down, there is a significant fear that things could escalate, and God only knows what could happen at that point.
No question. Certainly a lot of fear here and around the region. Avi Mayer, thanks so much for joining us today.